Hello, this is a message for you if you're watching this. This video is gonna have a lot of spoiler content for Luigi's Mansion 3. It's gonna have boss footage, gameplay footage, and music from towards the end of the game, so... Alright, this is your warning, your last warning. Here I go! Hello everybody, my name is Ant, no relation to Mr. Dude, and I was a little disappointed with Luigi's Mansion 3 for the Nintendo Switch. I can explain! Let me be completely clear, I didn't want to be disappointed with this game. The original Luigi's Mansion on GameCube is probably my favorite game of all time. I've played it over a dozen times, but when I picked up this game on launch day, I found myself very quickly just getting a little tired of it. I put it down about 10 hours into the adventure, but now that I didn't have anything to do for some reason, I just thought might as well finish it. And now that I played the game and reached the conclusion, I definitely have a lot of thoughts about it. It is one of the most mixed experiences I've had in a long time. It does so many things right, but it also has a lot of design choices that I feel hold it back from being the great sequel it really could have been. So in this video, I really just hope to talk about this game, some things I like about it, and some things that I think made it a little disappointing for me. And at the end of the video, I just want to give some ideas for what I personally would have done to make this game a little better. With all that being said, let's just jump right into it. Quick backstory on Luigi. You know Luigi, green, tall, famously well endowed. Luigi spent most of his early career being forced into the Player 2 status in Mario games, usually functioning as a straight up palette swap to Mario. However, in 2001, Nintendo went nuts and released what was quite possibly the weirdest launch title they could have ever come up with. The original Luigi's Mansion for the Nintendo GameCube. I cannot overstate how big of a risk the original Luigi's Mansion was for the company at that time. Their previous console, the Nintendo 64, wasn't exactly flying off the shelves. It sold okay, relatively speaking, but it was definitely a bit of a failure when you look at the sales of the competing PlayStation 1. Nintendo had to make some big swings in the next generation in order to retake the throne that they had held for so many years with the NES and Super NES. So their response was releasing a deep cleaning simulator to launch their newest system, slapping the green Mario on the box and just calling it a day. I gotta say, I respect the move mainly because of how genuinely fun the game turned out to be. It does have its flaws, namely its short length, but regardless, that game still has a cult following to this day. Enough of a cult following that they re-release it on the 3DS and not the Switch. But more importantly, this game established Luigi, who was once a mere palette swap, into a character of his own, a lovable, ghost-fearing hero who overcomes his own cowardice time and time again in order to defeat enemies and save his brother. With this single game, Nintendo established Luigi as a far more interesting character than even Mario himself, and that's quite a feat considering how things had been up until that point. Then Nintendo completely forgot about that game until 12 years later when they finally and somewhat randomly released a sequel, Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon here in America, and Luigi's Mansion 2 everywhere else, for the Nintendo 3DS. And look, I'm just not a big fan of this one, honestly. Like, hey, it's a beautiful game, it's fun and inventive, and I'm just glad that they didn't replace Professor Egad with a toad in a lab coat or something, but this game did strip away a lot of the charm of the original. The two main changes are in tone and gameplay style. In terms of tone, gone are the legitimately creepy, darker, atmospheric moments of the first game, in favor of a much cartoonier style, which I'm gonna get into more when I finally start talking about the third game. As for gameplay, it's more episodic now, I guess in order to fit the short bursts handheld gameplay. It just doesn't work for me personally. It feels like constant padding. I really hate when Polterpup steals your stuff. Although, that might be more because I have my own white dog stealing my stuff all the time in real life. I hate dealing with Egad calling you 20 times a minute. It's just somewhat repetitive, but to be fair, considering they stuffed this game on a 3DS, they did do well enough with what they had. I played it once, thought it was fine. I tried to play it again recently and got bored less than halfway through. It's really not as bad as I'm making it out to be. I'd still say it's worth at least a single playthrough, but that's as far as I'd go for that one. So now we finally reach the present day. Yep, the present day is 2019 brought us Luigi's Mansion 3 for the Nintendo Switch, released on Halloween of that year. A little odd that they went with a release date at the tail end of the spooky season, but apparently that was due to the developers at Next Level Studios putting final touches on the game up until the last minute, so it's not too big of a deal. Hi. Yeah, hi everybody. I made a whoopsie. Their name is Next Level Games, not Next Level Studios. I felt bad naming the developers wrong. It didn't feel right. Sorry about that, but anyway, let's get back to the show! Yeah! And also, people forget the fact that Dark Moon came out in March, which, come on Nintendo, what kind of joke is it releasing a spooky game in March? So let's go over some of the overwhelmingly positive aspects of this game first. The sound and art design. I firmly believe that this is the single best looking game on the Nintendo Switch, hands down. Games like Breath of the Wild might be more technically impressive, I won't argue with that, but Luigi's Mansion 3, visually it's just in a class of its own. They absolutely nail the design of this world, the characters, the lighting, the expressiveness. Even the simplest thing like a window in the background looks clean as hell. It legitimately looks like a Pixar movie at some points, and I'm not even talking about the cutscenes. I'm talking about the actual game. It's unbelievable to me how they pulled all of this off on the Switch. I do understand that it being a fixed camera game with largely pre-programmed events taking place, as opposed to a larger sandbox game like Breath of the Wild or Mario Odyssey, they were able to focus on a very scripted experience where pretty much every player will see the same thing. But that being said, it really can't be overstated. This is the most beautiful game on the Switch, equally perfect sound design that works brilliantly with the visuals. Similarly, as I mentioned earlier, I want to touch on the issue of the game's tone. Like the sequel on the 3DS, this game is not creepy or scary. In fact, it isn't really trying to be creepy or scary. Instead, it's going for a more vivid, cartoony, Scooby-Doo-esque take on horror, and that's completely fine. A lot of fans who prefer the first game really dislike this tonal shift because the spookiness was one of the biggest draws of the original. And I'll admit, 100% personal preference here, but I do prefer the darker tone of the first game. There were some legitimately unexpected and creepy story beats and interactions that were very novel for a Mario game. I'll never forget that feeling of finding Mario trapped in his painting for the first time. That freaked me out as a kid, and the game played it straight. They actually let the moment land and immediately followed it up with a ghost jumping right behind Luigi. Like, stuff like that is lacking in this third outing, and again, that's okay, because that's the thing. While I might personally prefer one style over the other, this game was very clearly happy to pursue the sillier atmosphere, and it's an atmosphere that is completely enjoyable in its own way. Sure, I will say that I wish some of the ghosts were less prankster personality and more ghosts trying to murder Luigi like in the original, but to be fair, it's been established that these are good ghosts being possessed by King Boo's evil, I guess, whereas in the first game they were actually just evil ghosts who were trying to kill you for fun, so with that in mind, I can live with it. I really do feel like the shift in tone worked out really well, and I'm happy with it, even if I do prefer how things used to be. But regardless of how I feel, I wouldn't dock any points off a game's score for not doing something that it doesn't even want to be doing in the first place, you know what I mean? But then we move on to the actual gameplay, and here's where my experience becomes a little more negative. In Luigi's Mansion 3, you explore an unrealistically tall hotel using a few different abilities to solve puzzles, suck up ghosts, and collect treasure. That at its core is this game's entire shtick, for about 15 to 20 hours. And that length leads into my first major issue. Look, I realize it sounds pretty silly to complain that a game is too long, and I already mentioned earlier that the first game might have been too short, but bear with me here. I think that 15 to 20 hours is the perfect length for a game like this, but my problem is that it didn't feel like a 15-hour game. I was actually pretty surprised to see that I hadn't been playing for longer, because at a certain point the repetition just kicked in for me really hard. I think the core of this issue lies in the game's mechanics. See, Luigi has several tools at his disposal, mostly related to his flashlight or his vacuum. A plunger projectile, a burst that allows him to leap in place, a regular flashlight to stun ghosts, a strobe light that reveals some pretty obviously hidden secrets, and oh yeah, Gooigi, a second Luigi who I hate, made out of disgusting goo that can walk through spikes and into grates and stuff. But also he functions as the game's co-op mechanism, which is really neat, but I never tried it out myself. Here's the thing though, you obtain all of these abilities very early on in the adventure, they never change, they never upgrade, they never feel challenging or engaging to use. Even up until the final moments I spent with the game, if I was ever truly stumped on how to defeat a boss ghost or solve a room's puzzle or whatever, I would pretty much just cycle through my various abilities until one of them worked out. For that reason, it often felt like I was simply going through the motions rather than actually solving these puzzles. And for that reason, I never really felt that sense of accomplishment that makes solving puzzles in games like this feel so rewarding. And because of the fact that I never really felt challenged or like I was learning or progressing, it made the game feel like a slog by the time I reached the ending. Being a Luigi's Mansion game, the gameplay loop manifests itself in the collection of secrets and treasure, the hunting of ghosts, and the exploration. So let's go over each of these individually. The secret hunting is satisfying on its own in the sense that sucking up big wads of gold coins just feels good. It makes your controller rumble all around, play satisfying sound effects. It's a good time. However, much like in the first game, it never feels like this money is worth much of anything. You can use your cash to purchase exactly 3 different types of items in the shop. A gold bone that revives you if you die in battle, a radar to track boos, and a radar to track gems. None of these items really feel like they're worth your money, although I will admit that I did buy a couple of the 1-up bones towards the end of the game. But that's the thing. I'm glad I didn't spend more money than I did, because the other thing the money does in this game is determine your endgame rank. See, at the end of the game, the more money you have in your pockets, the more it impacts your final score. Here's my problem with this system. First of all, the game never informs you that your final score is based only on how much money you actually have when you defeat the final boss, not on how much money you collected throughout the game. Meaning that if you're going for a max score and I purchase a few 1-up bones for 1,000 gold each, you'll have a much harder time reaching your goal. And this would be completely fine if the game warned you about it even once. Instead, they introduce a shop for you to spend your money at, and then they punish you at the end of the game if you were stupid enough to shop at it. It's a little ridiculous that they didn't bother to even make note of that. In addition, the fact that a game of this length has such a small completion reward as a ranking system for collecting all that gold is a little frustrating. The first game was like this too, but that game actually benefited from its shorter length in this case. You can blaze through the original Luigi's Mansion in like 3 to 4 hours, so there is some replayability to trying to find as much money as possible in order to achieve the max rank. For a game as long as this one, however, I don't feel as personally inclined to replay it again and again as the original. Therefore, I only wish that there was a better post-game reward for finding tons of coins. Maybe a secret floor where you can have a rematch with a couple of harder versions of boss ghosts you fought throughout the game. Maybe you can unlock a new game plus, which is weirdly absent from this one entirely despite being a feature of the original game. Or maybe the game can count how much money you collect on each floor of the hotel, rather than just your total score. And this could go towards unlocking additional content based on the floors you got a good rank in. Kinda like being rewarded with an extra level for collecting all of the star coins in each world of New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe DX Advance whatever. I'm not sure, but as it is, it just feels like collecting all the gold is less essential here than it's ever been before. Aside from the money, you also find 6 hidden gems on each floor, and 1 hidden boo per floor as well. I have nothing to say about either of these. They exist, they're fine challenges for completionists, and it's fun trying to track down all the gems, I guess, but finding them all rewards you very little, and I didn't really feel inclined to get them all, so I didn't. It kinda sucks that a gameplay mechanic that encourages deeper exploration feels so throwaway in terms of its execution, but I will say that even though I do feel that way, I appreciate these goodies being here regardless. So that's the collectibles. Now we can talk about the ghost hunting. In Luigi's Mansion 3, you're given a new ability to use while sucking up ghosts, a powerful slam attack that allows you to beat up other ghosts in the area as you focus on sucking up the ones in front of you. I'm extremely conflicted with this system. It's definitely more action-packed and exciting if you're into that sort of thing, but at the same time, it takes a lot of the challenge out of a game that already lacks so much challenge to begin with. There are some moments where they throw 8 or 10 ghosts at you at once, but it's not hard to just grab the largest ghost in the room, usually the big red boy, use it as a baseball bat to beat all the other ghosts, then grab those ghosts, and repeat until all ghosts are eliminated. I did try playing the game without using the slam ability, but it's just not designed with that gameplay method in mind, and I didn't think that made things more challenging, but just more annoying. On the other hand, I do appreciate the developers for trying to find a new, more engaging way to add to a ghost hunting system that didn't really change all too much between the first 2 games. So this isn't my biggest gripe in terms of gameplay, but I think I could have lived without it. In addition to the basic ghosts all over the place, there are also boss ghosts at the end of each floor. I do greatly appreciate the developers trying their best to give these ghosts personalities and make them match the theme of each floor you're exploring. And some of these fights were a great time, such as the Godzilla fight with the movie director ghost, which is probably one of the highlights of the whole game, as well as the ghost shark towards the end of the game. I just thought that fight was really neat, and I like the concept of a ghost shark. But a lot of these fights, honestly, just go on way too long. They're not exactly challenging, and a lot of the time you're kind of just running in circles, dodging attacks, waiting for the boss to open its weakness up for you. I found a lot of these to be rather tedious simply because, as I had mentioned earlier, it was never too hard to deduce the best way to defeat them, what with all the tools at my disposal never changing. In terms of design and creativity, they were arguably the highlight of the whole game. I feel that they could have been a lot more refined, however. This is a similar problem I had with the 2 newest Donkey Kong Country games. Those boss fights were incredibly designed and oozing with creativity, but when a boss fight just keeps going and going and going, the charm does wear off a bit. Thankfully, it isn't too difficult to defeat most of these enemies on your first attempt, so I'm glad I never really dealt with, having to start any fight from the beginning over and over again, nothing like that. Lastly, we get to the idea of exploration, which I feel is the area in the game that is lacking the most. Let me elaborate, because on the surface, these hotel floors are absolutely packed to the brim with gold, gems, and other fun things to see and find. But at the same time, as I explained earlier, there isn't a lot of reward for collecting any of these things. So when you really break it down, the game ends up feeling very bogged down by its own design, its strict linearity, its moments of padding, its lack of a real difficulty curve. All of these aspects bring down what is a wonderfully crafted world and extremely unique and varied environments that are constantly changing as the game progresses. But I really want to focus on that one concept for a moment, the game's linearity. First of all, a lot of people seem to have this impression that the original Luigi's Mansion was way more non-linear than it really was. Like, it's certainly a game that allows you to uncover a few secrets at your own pace, and even includes a couple of optional boss challenges that you can outright skip over. But besides that, that first game does indeed funnel you from beginning to end in a fairly straight line. But it's the illusion of open-endedness that adds quite a bit to the overall vibe of that game. The sequel, being episodic, obviously had no room whatsoever for non-linearity. Each mission lasts for like 10 to 15 minutes. You're pretty much always being guided from one room to the next. Kind of repetitive, but it is what it is. Luigi's Mansion 3, however, despite appearing a bit more open than Dark Moon on the surface, is still about as linear as they come. The game starts off feeling a little open, but you realize very quickly that you're essentially being forced to go through the many floors of this hotel in a very set order, dealing with moments of backtracking when the game specifically makes you do so, with the ultimate goal of reaching the very top of the hotel in order to face off against King Boo. These moments of backtracking, by the way, especially in regards to hunting down the ghost cat, are especially egregious, simply because they are fundamentally adding nothing but padding to the experience. They don't open up any new areas you haven't already seen, they don't provide much extra challenge, they simply exist to break up the gameplay, but it's done so in a way that, to me personally, feels very obstructive and frankly just plain annoying. And all of that to me is the game's main flaw. Look, I can see upsides to pretty much everything I complained about up until this point. It's cool that the game is constantly rewarding you with gold for exploring, even if the gold has no real value. It's neat that you're given all your abilities early on, even if that leads to somewhat monotonous gameplay over time. And the new mechanic of slamming ghosts into each other, while oversimplifying an already quite simple game, is certainly satisfying to pull off simply because of how overtly violent it is. But the game's overall linear structure, while seemingly a small grievance, is the one issue I have with this game that fundamentally diminished my enjoyment of the whole experience. So let's look at what Luigi's Mansion 3 is for a second. You're thrown into a hotel, trying to find elevator buttons in order to advance the story. These floors don't feel like they become progressively challenging as you advance through them, with the exception of larger clumps of ghosts showing up later in the adventure. You never learn any new permanent abilities after the opening hours of the game. Well, except for one super strong vacuum sucking ability that seems like you're gonna use it throughout the rest of the game, but you only use it for one very situational task, then you never use it again. But yeah, besides that, no new permanent abilities, nothing like that. So how would I tweak things if I were able to? Well, imagine for a second that the game is fundamentally the same, with the same enemies, the same bosses, the same collectibles and money and annoying cat and everything else, but with one major difference. The elevator isn't missing any buttons, minus the button to access King Boo's lair. Not counting said lair, there are 16 floors to explore. Now imagine for a moment the game allows you to tackle these floors in any way you please, with the goal of defeating the boss at the end of each. You can start in the basement and work your way up, or start high and head downstairs, or jump all around as you please. The ghost enemies you encounter along the way, they scale in difficulty with you, growing a little stronger and more varied after you defeat each boss. As it is currently, the boss battles don't become exceptionally harder as the game goes on, so they can pretty much remain the same with no issue. Instead of having to defeat every floor in order to beat the game, you're tasked with only defeating 12 or 13 of them fully, minus like the gems and whatnot, in order to access the final lair. Sure, you can definitely complete all 16 floors if you want to, but that would be more of a completionist challenge, similar to the 70-star minimum of Super Mario 64. The game can still have its moments of padding with the ghost cat and finding the toads and whatnot, but they can be designed in such a way to appear after defeating every second or third boss towards the beginning of any random room you haven't explored yet. That way, rather than coming off as a form of backtracking, they can instead guide you to new floors that you haven't played through yet. I firmly believe that these tweaks would still contain the spirit and design of the game that we have currently, while opening itself up in such a way to provide more rewarding, surprising moments for the player. In addition, this new style would allow players to find their ideal path, and it would allow speedrunners to optimize their fastest routes, adding to the replayability in a major way. I know it might be a little crazy, but what I am essentially proposing is a Metroidvania version of Luigi's Mansion 3. And honestly, I could keep expanding this idea further with other changes, such as, for example, the game's money being used to unlock your abilities as you go on, rather than starting the game with all of them at once. But my goal here is to keep my ideas based on the game that currently exists, not one that I'm just completely creating from the ground up in my head. And changes like that would require many aspects of the game to be completely redone. And at the end of the day, I truly do believe that Luigi's Mansion 3 is a wonderful game that deserves the high praise that it's gotten. But what holds it back, to me, is a gameplay system that is often too rigid, too repetitive, and essentially just too much of the same. So there we go. That was Luigi's Mansion 3 for the Nintendo Switch. I want to make it clear again, this game as it is objectively good. Any disappointment that I had with it doesn't speak to the game's overall quality, its presentation, and the fun that you might have had with it. But at the end of the day, if I can summarize everything I said, I feel like this game overstays its welcome just a little bit, and with a little bit of tweaking, it could have been a true step forward for a game series that deserves the love that it's gotten, and quite frankly, it's just a game series that I'm glad Nintendo hasn't thrown away like some of its other beloved IPs. But hey, I appreciate your time. Whether you loved my ideas or hated them or want to burn me alive, let me know in the comments down below. But until then... Thunder!